Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox and thanks for logging on. We're waking up with watches this weekend and everything is for sale. Reach out to me, Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com with your questions about the pricing of these watches. We're going to start off with a big piece, and I have to remind you that we are also building inventory. We buy, we trade, we sell. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com to buy, trade, or sell with me. So, the promised big piece, figuratively speaking, not literally, as the Rolex 126720VTNR is a nicely sized modern-day Lefty GMT-Master, one of the hottest watches of last model year. This is a timepiece that features a Lefty crown, a black and green bezel, a first on a Rolex GMT-Master, in combination, as seen here with the 5-link Jubilee dress bracelet. We'll zoom out a little bit, we'll throw it on the wrist. This watch has a wonderful presence. It's a lot of fun. It's supremely comfortable, and despite the orientation of the crown, it is an ambidextrous watch. Now, taking a quick look, you can see that it's low in profile. It slips easily underneath the dress cuff, and it's short enough lug to lug that I can recommend this watch for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters in circumference. Of course, it has two constantly displayed time zones with the ceramic bezel. You can calculate a third instantaneous time zone. It's a certified chronometer. It has a power reserve of almost 3 days. It is highly anti-magnetic as well as shock resistant. And inside the clasp, you can see, though this is the Jubilee, we still have the EasyLink 5mm snap-in, snap-out quick adjustment system. The watch is also 100 meters water resistant, so this is a pilot-themed watch, and yet you can absolutely take it swimming. The bezel, bi-directional with ceramic insert. You can actually see these little numerals and indices. They're deposits of platinum inside of the ceramic. The dial is a gloss lacquer black base with white gold hands and indices, and you can see that green varnished GMT hand right there. Operate the mechanism, and you can see that the watch is a handy traveling companion, and you're able to adjust the date forward or backward as you cross the international date line. It's also quite slender in profile, well under 13 millimeters thick. These GMT Masters, lefty or righty, are versatile watches that can wear formally just as they can, and you can tell here that I'm a righty. They wear formally just as well as they wear in a sporting vein. A wonderful all-arounder and with plenty of luminescence. Take note that all 4 of the hands on this dial are luminescent. You can even read that second time zone independently. Now, jumping from one elaborately loomed watch to another, I'm going to see if you guys can guess before you see it in the light, but I think you're going to have at least some idea because this one is legendary. Let's get a little bit closer. It pretty much looks exactly the same in the dark as it does by light. Have you guessed? I hope you have, because if you guessed the Lange und Söhne Grand Lange 1 Lumen, you were correct. Let's actually take the lights down one more time. This is a 200-piece platinum limited edition, 41 millimeters from 2013. It was the second to the Lumen series after the Zeitwerk, and you can see that it has a smoked sapphire dial so that light can get through and charge up the discs of the panorama datum. So when it slides into place with the turnover or the quick indexing, the discs themselves are already loomed. That's why luminescent discs pop up, and that's also why the dial has been smoked so that light can get through. We have a power reserve indicator, which is loomed. The watch has a 3-day manual wind power reserve, courtesy of 2 barrels. We have white gold hands and a white gold frame for the date. The watch is quite slim in profile, and you can see the finish is nuanced with a combination of polish and satination, Lange branded crown. And here's something you don't generally see on Lange watches. We have a full matching Brogioli built platinum deployant clasp. So most Lange watches, even complications, often come with just a pin buckle. This is a wonderfully deluxe add-on that makes the watch much harder to accidentally drop. Flip it all over, and there's nothing to complain about on the reverse side, although this is one of the few Lange watches that might be more exciting on the dial side than it is on the case back, though the case back is formidable. You can see that we have that golden hue across the bridges and plates because of the use of German silver, a nickel copper zinc alloy that was native to the pocket watch era. That's why it's used here, the copper giving it that golden hue. We have stripes across the bridges. We have both polished and blued screws, fire blued screws. You can see there's mirrored beveling, not just on the edge of the bridges, but also around the access hatches for service. We have jewels set in golden chaton cups, which are themselves fixed by screws, another nod to the pocket watch era of Lange watchmaking, and a 3/4 style pocket watch inspired bridge. Now we'll get a little bit closer, and you can see that the balance cock features a black polished swan's neck steel adjustment mechanism, but it also includes a freehand engraved surface executed with a burin. No lathes there, all done by hand. We have a black polished steel cap atop the escape wheel, and note that there is a sharp inward angle where the bevels meet, a difficult feat of finishing. You can see this one's number 124 of 200. Every version of the Lumen thus far has been a limited edition, and the watch has a wonderful wrist presence. It's not too large, though it is a Grande Lange one. It's the second generation Grande Lange one that's 41 millimeters in diameter rather than 42, and you can see it's super flat flush, fits easily underneath the cuff, and an easy watch to read day or night. Now, I said that watch is a rare Lange that's more interesting on the dial side than on the case back, but if you're familiar with this watch, then you already realize where I'm going here. This is the legendary, new for 2018, a Lange und Söhne Saxonia Thin Copper Blue. The copper blue, 39 millimeters in diameter, in white gold, is defined by a dial that blazes. Now, you can see right here, we have aventurine glass, beautifully fired on a solid gold dial base. And you can see that we have white gold hands and indices. And no two of these dials are going to be exactly alike. The minerals inside the enamel creating the look of a bottomless cosmos, as though you're staring off into space. As I measure it, only 6.5 millimeters thick. The movement is as handsome as any Lange, and I do appreciate the solarized crown wheel and ratchet wheel. It has a 3-day power reserve, but all of the action here is on this side of the watch. I'll throw it on my wrist, and you can see 39 by 6.5, we're super flat flush and close coupled to the wrist. Why would you need a FP Journe Chronometre Bleu in a world where this exists? For far less money, I think you're getting more watch and an absolute landmark piece from Lange in 2018. That aventurine glass dial, elevating this watch to the upper echelons of two-handed watches, not just in the modern era, but ever. Here's a fun piece. This was new for the 2023 model year, and you can see it is a jade dial, 7-day power reserve, tantalum cased, Moser Cie Endeavour Perpetual. So it uses Andreas Striller's Perpetual calendar system, and you have a bidirectionally settable calendar. Note, either direction. Take a quick look. You can see there's a stub index on the dial, 12 hours corresponding to 12 months, and that is how the calendar system represents the jump from month to month. Now, when it's turning itself over, obviously it's going to make the correct jump for the month in question. But when you use the quick set, it turns every month into February. So that's what you're looking at right there. Now, it also has a hacking or stop seconds function, so you can stop the seconds hand. The dial is glorious marbled green jade. We have a power reserve indicator. It is a 7-day power reserve, though in fact the watch will run for almost 9. Now take a look at the case, a rarity in the industry. Even today, that mystical blue-gray tantalum and satin and polish, ridiculously difficult to finish. That took about 2 years of research and development by Moser before this case could be brought to market. Note the deeply sculpted and mirrored concave hollows of the lugs, the fluid form of this concave bezel that thins out at the mid-case, but then expands at 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. The case back itself, with a vaulted curve to trace the underside of the arc of your wrist. It's almost like molten metal was drawn out and then flash frozen. The movement is deeply impressive, as you can see. Twin barrels, each one fixed in a golden chaton, a nod to the pocket watch era of Moser watchmaking. Much like Lange has that homage to its pocket watch era, so does Moser. We have 3/4 style bridge architecture, though you can see the bridges are split for easier service. The chaton lead all the way down to the escapement, which is 14-karat solid gold, and along with the balance and the hairsprings made in-house by Moser, it is their own design and their own fabrication. Through their precision engineering subsidiary, they are one of the few companies in the business that can make escapements, balances, and hairsprings. Now, it beats away at 18,000 vibrations per hour, and if you look closely, you can see we have 2 flat hairsprings opposed by 180 degrees. So if due to position, one causes the balance to run slow, well, then the other will cause it by an equal and opposite margin to run more quickly. You can also see that there's a pusher adjuster on the flank, and then there is a leap year phase indicator on the back, as Streller, when he designed this system for Moser, assumed that you wouldn't need to reference the leap year too often, so he hid it on the case back. You can see this is one of only 10 made, 10 in lapis, 10 in jade. The jade is probably the one that's gotten the biggest reaction, which is why it's also the tougher of the two to find. This is a great example of the jade, 42 millimeters in diameter. I'll show it to you on my wrist. It wears nicely because of the curvature of the lugs and the curvature of that case back. Pop my camera up a little bit, throw it on the wrist. It's a full-sized watch, but not an oversized watch, and you can see down the barrel, the lugs aren't at the edge of my wrist. So if your wrist is 15 centimeters or circumference, game on. You're going to love the way this looks, functions, and feels. A really special piece, and you can feel the mass of that platinum in the hand, or I should say, pardon me, tantalum in the hand. Actually, it's made of two different materials. Let me show you something. The crown, the case back, and the buckle are made of stainless steel. The case itself and the bezel are made of tantalum. So in a very, very subtle fashion, this is actually the stealthiest two-tone watch of 2023. Now, I jumped the gun, but here now we have platinum, and we have it in the form of a 99-piece limited edition that was built out over several model years from 2002 to 2006, part of the 5-piece times 99-unit FP Journe ruthenium series. This is the Octa chronograph. Now, the chronograph here, 40 millimeters in platinum, a 99-piece edition. It has a solid gold dial that's been ruthenium coated to have that lovely anthracite tone. Now, it's also a grande date chronograph with a 60-minute chronograph register and flyback chronograph action. I don't think I've wound this one. Oh, no, I have wound this a little bit. It has a 120-hour automatic winding power reserve. It is a flyback, which means it resets and restarts without first stopping. When you roll it over, you can see that it features ruthenium-coated brass bridges, and you can see this is the Eleanor era, so you have the Eleanor maker's mark and then French hallmarks there. Right up until about mid-2008, all Journe cases were made by Eleanor outside of Paris and France. So we've got a ruthenium-coated brass movement. This is a brass movement FP Journe, so it's part of that era, but it's also ruthenium-coated, which makes it a rarity among rarities. The watch includes a spectacular matching deployant clasp, which is a rare feature on Journe watches. The ruthenium watches are hugely collectible because they are limited editions, because collecting all 5 is the ultimate Journe collector's theme, and because they look different from anything else Journe has ever made. 40 millimeters in diameter, every version of the ruthenium series was a 40 millimeter watch, and you can see how nicely it sits on the wrist, being only about 48 millimeters from lug to lug, fairly thin with a domed bezel. It slides easily underneath the cuff, a wonderful timepiece, and an absolute pleasure to encounter. Whether you want to buy just one significant FP Journe, build out an entire collection, or the ultimate brass ring, collect all of the ruthenium watches, this is a great place to start. Now, I have to admit, I respect Francois Paul Journe and I respect the Journe brand, but I don't pine for them. I don't particularly like most of the watches enough to buy them. I like, but I don't love, in other words. This is the exception. This and the Chronometre Holland and Holland. What you're looking at here is the most accurate mechanical watch FP Journe knows how to make. It's the realization of his dream to walk in the footsteps of Breguet, a combination of a remontoir d'égalité constant force device, Breguet overcoil hairspring, free sprung balance adjusted in 6 positions, 2 mainspring barrels in series, and a self-starting titanium unlubricated double direct impulse escapement. This is the Chronometre Optum in black label form and 42 millimeters. Let me explain. Black Label was created in 2008 to deliver the most exclusive experience in a series production FP Journe watch. You had to be a prior purchaser of FP Journe watches, you had to buy through a boutique, and then only 2 examples of a model, I should say, could be made black label per year. Very exclusive. Now add the unusual and still rarely spec'd 42 millimeter case, and we've got an extraordinary watch. I should also mention that the CO black label is one of the rarest black label watches, as it's infrequently ordered, and that's because it's a very cerebral watch. Now you can see on the dial side I have a power reserve indicator that indicates up to 40 hours. Power reserve here is 70 hours, but for 45 hours it will maintain constant balance amplitude thanks to constant force to the escapement. Now if you look carefully, you can see that little power reserve is running backwards. As I wind it, it winds up towards 0. Like a marine chronometer, it indicates 0 when fully wound for 0 hours since the last full winding. Now we have sweep seconds on the dial, but thanks to the remontoir constant force device, we also have deadbeat seconds on the reverse of the watch. And a little bit unconventionally, you could see it is a countdown deadbeat second. It actually moves counterclockwise even as it counts up to 60. So it's got a countdown swing to it that's unusual and counterintuitive to the eye, but you can see that it is beautiful, it is poetic, and you can also note the titanium linear spring. Every second, energy from the barrels, twin barrels in series, gets transferred to the spring, and through the spring in a secondary escapement, channeled down to the double direct impulse escapement with its titanium wheels. This ensures that for 45 hours, each second, the same amount of energy is driving the escapement. Until 45 hours, the barrels never directly drive the escapement, and that's the secret there. There is no Swiss lever, none. The two escape wheels directly impulse the balance, and only in the balance's direction of travel, clockwise and counterclockwise. Unlike most Journe watches, which tend to be adjusted in 5 positions, this one's adjusted in 6. Unlike most Journe watches, which tend to use flat hairsprings, this one has an overcoil. And again, that unlubricated titanium escapement is inspired by Breguet's 1802 natural escapement, but unlike Breguet's, this one is self-starting. Truly spectacular as well. You can see elements like black polish lavishly applied, including on the bridge for the escape wheels and also on the stud holder cap. It is handsomely decorated to a higher standard than a normal Journe watch, so keep that in mind when you're shopping this timepiece. It's exceptional in every way. These watches are accurate to less than a second gained per 24 hours, which is far in excess of chronometer. Now you can see on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, it wears just fine. I believe if your wrist is my size or larger, you're going to find this is an outstanding companion. And while Journe himself has said that the escapement system he devised is thicker than he would like, take a look at that. That's the tail. I think he's being too critical. This is a very thin, flat, and fine watch. Now, de Bethune of Lauberson, Switzerland is probably my first and deepest love among independent brands. Whereas I respect Journe, I love de Bethune. Some de Bethune watches are the ultimate scarcity. They are made in a few dozen pieces, sometimes in single digits, and then discontinued. If Denis Flageolet has one hallmark as the lead watchmaker and creative force at de Bethune, it's that he's got a grasshopper mind and he moves on rapidly, which is why the most attractive versions of the first generation DB27 Titan Hawk are so avidly sought by collectors. Now this is the 27 Titan Hawk, 43 millimeters in grade 5 titanium with spring-loaded floating variable geometry lugs that we saw back in 2012 when the initial 27 came out, which means it has the 6-day automatic power reserve movement inside it, not the later 60-hour that came out in 2018. This is the 6-day automatic. It has a solid silicon disc balance of de Bethune's own design, hairspring and escape wheel of the company's own design. The rim of the silicon balance is all white gold to put as much the mass as possible in the rim for better timekeeping and stability. On the dial side, an extraordinary array. We have printing in blue, we have a deeply dished dial with fantastic depth, we have fired titanium hands for the hours, minutes, and then this Moonlander-like deltoid date indicator, which does have a quick set. De Bethune makes cases, dials, and movements all in-house, so they control the entire process. The money always goes back into the manufacturer. And because a traditional rosette guilloche would look out of place on such a modern watch, Denis Flageolet created the microlight engraving, which is this concentric grooved pattern you see across the center dial, and that is nothing less than reductive guilloche in a fashion that doesn't look like it belongs on a pocket watch. He respects tradition, but he also looks to innovate, and he wants to make sure that the design conventions of a modern watch are entirely modern. Really here, the only concessions to tradition are the standard of finishing of the movement, the modified Breguet hands, and the use of radially arrayed Roman numerals. Throw it on the wrist, it wears beautifully. This watch will wear on a wrist as small as 14 centimeters in circumference. You can see on each side, the lugs are well inboard of my wrist, and because they are spring-loaded, they will curve and contour to fit the wrist. Being all grade 5 titanium and sapphire, it is super light on the wrist and hypoallergenic, and grade 5 is both lighter and more scratch-resistant than standard stainless steel. So a very desirable watch on many levels, especially since this is a discontinued version of the 27 Titan Hawk, and being titanium with the salmon dial, it is one of the rarest and most desirable versions of that discontinued first-generation Titan Hawk. I like complications, though, and perpetual calendars are, in my eye, the most desirable next to alarms. Alarms and perpetual calendars both sing to me because they're profoundly practical. Now, no one says you need a expensive watch to read the calendar or the moon phase. You can do that on a phone, but there's something magical about doing it with a machine, a fully mechanical machine. It's almost magic. Now here we do have a more traditional design, as we have the rosette guilloche, which is done on a rose lathe at de Bethune, inside a traditional round case with fixed lugs, solid dial, automatic winding, 5-day power reserve, and a perpetual calendar. We have the day, the date, the month. You can see there's a little leap year phase indicator below a spherical moon phase. Now we'll get close here. You can see that moon phase is quite literally a sphere, three-dimensional. It is 1/2 blued steel fired with a traditional oil lamp and 1/2 white palladium. And whereas the perpetual calendar need not be touched until the year 2100, the moon phase doesn't have to be touched until 1,112 years after it's been set. Now the watch is 44 millimeters in diameter, but don't be deceived. It's only 12.6 millimeters thick and approximately 51 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip. So I'll throw this on my wrist so you can get a sense of the scale. It's quite easily accommodated. I do think that if your wrist is any smaller than mine, you want to go with a 42 millimeter or a 40 millimeter de Bethune DB25, but this wears just fine, and as you can see, easily slides underneath the cuff. Now this one in white gold features a de Bethune white gold buckle to match. And then on the reverse side, you can see that the movement is comprehensively engineered for durability. So to have the longest possible lever arm and the greatest winding efficiency, Denis has a broad rotor. But to prevent torquing as opposed to rotational motion, he's put 4 cantilever springs at the center of the rotor to prevent it from moving in ways that are unproductive to winding and damaging to the ball bearing system. And you can see each one of these springs has 3 jewels set in it to reduce the friction when the rotor center touches the springs. We have 1, 2, 3 shock protection springs on the balance. The balance is the 2016 patent design with a titanium wheel and white gold masses outboard, and all of this with twin barrels, beautifully finished with a high-tech aesthetic, blued titanium. Everything you see here that is blue is fired titanium. That's how they achieve that color on both the movement and on the dial side, including the hands. And it's got that 5-day power reserve courtesy of twin mainspring barrels. Only a few dozen of these were made, so the exclusivity is assured. Again, case, dial, and movement all made in-house by de Bethune, and an exemplary example of a fun and practical haute horlogerie piece from a brand that has only just passed 3,000 watches made since its inception in 2002. When you buy a de Bethune, you're buying an investment for the future and something that is extraordinarily uncommon. Finally, we're going to end outside the bounds of Switzerland with the Grönefeld brothers, Tim and Bart. They're no longer accepting orders. Fortunately, Watchbox has several Grönefeld watches in stock and ready for immediate delivery, such as this 1941 Principia, an automatic watch in stainless steel, 39.5 millimeters in diameter. This was Grönefeld's first ever automatic watch, launched in late 2018 for the 2019 model year. We have extraordinary faceted and mirror-polished indices, fired blue steel alpha style hands, a lovely stepped grained orange dial to remind you that this is a Dutch watch. Orange Army, after all, representing. Also on the underside of the strap is made of buffalo leather, and you can see that unconventional grain with a contrasting orange stitch, wonderfully soft even when brand new. These do not need to be broken in order to feel buttery. They are wonderful factory straps. The case is extraordinarily nuanced with dips, nips, tucks, flares, creases, curves, all in high polish with a distinctive Grönefeld branded conical knurled crown. Flip it all over, the movement's spectacular. An automatic winder with a 56-hour power reserve. Its standout feature, at least to my eye, is the amount of attention given to architecture. Now, finishing is how well you decorate the parts. Architecture is their size, relative proportion, and relative arrangement and shaping. So you can see here we have the barrel, and then we have the train, reducing the torque of the barrel and increasing the velocity of the wheel all the way down to a full skeletonized balance bridge with a free-sprung balance. But you'll note these little bridges are in the shape of bell gable roofs, as in the bell gable roofing of traditional Dutch buildings. And all of these bridges are made of stainless steel. Why? Not because it's easy, but because it's hard. The Grönefeld brothers have Audemars Piguet Renault Papi pedigree, and they want to show off that ability, creating bridges that feature not one, not two, but 3 different finishes each, with media blasting internally, a satin channel along the border, and then on the edge, you can see that anglage lighting up like a mirror, a mile wide, as good as anything being done by Kari Voutilainen or Lange. You can also see solarization on the barrel, which I appreciate, and pivot jewels set in gold and chaton, a little nod to pocket watchmaking. 21,600 vibration per hour beat rate, and adjusted in 6 positions, not the high horology standard of 5, so going above and beyond, and beautifully rendered in every regard. Really as good as it gets. Even the buckle is handsome. We'll throw it on my wrist. My wrist is 16 centimeters in circumference. I'll note the watch is about 10.6 millimeters thick, 39.5 millimeters in diameter, and just under 47 millimeters from lug to lug. So this watch is suitable even for a lady's wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference. And we have several Principias right now, all with different strap and dial combinations ready for immediate delivery. So reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.